First, to welcome everyone here. Some of you have come from some distance. Some people have been away on trips. Lawson Sensei and Matt are both in Florida now, and this is the last day of that sesshin there. And it is also, some of you may remember, Easter Sunday today. Now on Easter Sunday, teisho falling on Easter Sunday, the obvious theme would be death and rebirth. Recently, a young member here was talking about how as compelling as these issues of death and rebirth are to someone who's young, perhaps even more compelling and relevant is the relationship between practice and relationships and intimacy. And of course, it's very hard when one is very young to, it's hard enough any time, but when you're young, to really get down with this death thing is pretty abstract. And I always remember Roshi in a sesshin giving an encouragement talk, standing there in the doorway of the Zendo in Rochester and sitting there and deep in sesshin, and him saying, "Oh, but young people," he said something about death, and he said, "but young people always think they're immortal." And at the time, I remember thinking, not me, But and death has always been, I think, for me, a strong motivation for practice. But still, I'm sure I still believed I was immortal on one level. I see people in their 80s who are still running on that assumption and denial, so it's not too surprising. But so today, and for some reason, this whole business around intimacy, relationship has been coming up. It's been coming up in all kinds of ways, coming up in conversations. So it's time now, it feels like today, to get into this, to explore some of this, and to look into the convergence of these two seemingly different issues: birth and death, or death and rebirth, and intimacy and relationship. Are they so different? And what really is intimacy anyway? And what about this word relationship? How many times a day do we hear this word? How many books are devoted on the shelves in the bookstores are devoted to this topic? How much mental and emotional energy is spent working on this? I feel, as time goes on, as my own life and practice and marriage move along, this whole issue of relationship seems increasingly mysterious. And in a sense, beside the point. Very much the point, and also beside the point. More and more, it seems to me that anyone who thinks they're very clear on this topic is not at all clear. And in the same sense, if you think you truly know somebody, oh, I know that person, oh yeah, through and through, you probably don't know them at all. chances are, unless this is based on profound experience of your own original nature, chances are you're just sticking them into some sort of box, freezing them into some familiar pattern of characteristics, and not grappling with the mystery, and not perhaps comfortable with the not knowing. There's wonderful words of Joseph Conrad. This is one of Lawson's favorite quotes, so you've maybe heard it more recently, but it's so appropriate here, where he says, "It is when we try to grapple with another person's intimate need that we perceive how incomprehensible, wavering, and misty are the beings that share with us the light of the stars and the warmth of the sun." How incomprehensible, wavering, and misty. After all, what is a person? And this question clearly brings us right back to the heart of it, to the heart of this practice. It is what or who are you? Are we? Am I? Brings us right back to Mu, to the breath, to this very unrepeatable moment. How can we possibly hope to be intimate with another without being intimate with this true self beyond birth and death? What does it mean to be intimate with yourself in any other context? When we postulate a self at all, which, of course, we do automatically unless we've exploded that illusion deep in our bones through practice, and it can always be deeper. When we postulate the separate self, immediately we create others, a whole world of others. And when we fail to grasp this underlying perfection and unity of all appearances, all phenomena, then we create this confusing world of multiplicity and separation, a world out there, beings out there. And then relationship, we get so involved in it because it's so confusing and scary. We want to be able to figure out a way to approach it, to plan it, to manipulate it, to fix it. There's a popular New Age saw. I guess the New Age isn't so new anymore, is it? It's kind of a cliche. Before you can love anyone, you've got to love yourself. You've got to be able to love yourself. And this can give way to all sorts of, positive thoughts and affirmations. I don't remember Stuart Smalley's words exactly. Some of you may, but something about I'm a really nice guy, and I deserve good things, or whatever it is. People like me, or whatever. This affirmation he'd do for himself, this funny character. Well, what does it mean to love yourself? Doesn't relating to oneself in any way imply this fundamental separation, this duality? And what about just being? Just being. Instead of having ideas of how we should relate, or loving ourselves, or loathing ourselves, or any of that. We can't get involved in these things, these notions of loving ourselves, without an acceptance of the reality of a discrete, personal, private self. And this fundamental teaching in Buddhism, this is the illusion. Cause of our sorrow is ego delusion. So these notions about, loving oneself and all of that really can add to the basic confusion and sense of separation. I'm reminded of Skylar, our dove, our 14-year-old dove, upstairs now in the bathroom, in our bathroom. And there's this enormous mirror up there in that bathroom. And when I let him out of his cage, put him on the sink, very often if he looks in that mirror, his wing, he either bats it with his wing, his reflection, or he starts to coo to himself. And it seemed like such a good exposition of this whole thing, What are we loving or what are we loathing? The whole problem is that gap, that separation. But to see into the depths of our being and to be it without that constant self-consciousness, that sense of self that's carried around and defended, and we try to present in some fashion. It gets right in the way, forms that wall between ourselves and everything else and everyone else, and then leaves us feeling lonely and wondering, how the heck do we relate to other people? How do you separate yourself from the cushion underneath you, from the air passing through you, from the sounds, the trilling of birds, the sensations in your body that you're experiencing right now, from the person next to you? Where are these boundaries? Where's the dividing line between you and that bird song right now? And what if it's true? What if it's true that there actually is no separate self at all to protect, or to build up, or to love or loathe? It's like loving or loathing vast space. Why would you do that? As Rilke says, the inner, what is it if not intensified sky, hurled through with birds and deep with the winds of homecoming? What if there's only this moment, as we call it? Not moment as some little increment of time, this swirling, shifting, ungraspable, unknowable experiencing. This living, mysterious moment. In the affirming faith in mind. No, that's not it. In the Kanzeon that we just chanted, there's the line. This moment arises from mind. This moment itself is mind. True mind. Mu. So who? Where all the names and the labels float on the surfaces only. And where all these imagined sharp-edged self-created boundaries dissolve. What then? Where this mu, or this who, fills every crevice of our being, of space and time. What does this have to do with relationship? Who is there to relate to whom? All the techniques, all the ideas, all the working on how to approach this and how to approach that fall apart here. And all that is not genuine cannot abide here. We're in touch with this, then a response comes straight from the core, from this coreless core. And this has nothing to do whatsoever with knowing something. This is great mystery at the center of all this. How do you really know anyone or anything? It's fascinating to read accounts of people who work with the dying or people who are in contact with someone that they've known and loved at the time of dying, or around the time of dying. Not even talking here about the moment of dying, but the process leading up to it as well. People talk about the shocking transformations that occur in a personality. They think they've known this person, mother or father or sister or brother, someone, a spouse, someone they've lived with, someone they thought they knew. And then something happens and the person is someone else completely. It isn't always some positive, seemingly positive transformation. That person who's always been so sweet and kind and pleasing of others suddenly has this temper and becomes very imperious. Or someone who's been extremely difficult and selfish, they suddenly open up to this bodhisattvic love and selflessness. What do we really know about anyone? How can you know anything except by plunging into this vast mystery at the very center of your own being? To experience this unmanifest, this unborn truth of your own being. This mu, this true one. To merge with the breath or the koan. This moment. If anybody asks me any more about marriage, I really don't know. I don't know nothing. It's just always increasingly mysterious to me. But the not knowing opens up another world. If we can touch into our own mystery and be there, the mystery of mu, or this breath, what we call breath, and get so we can stay there, the mystery of this moment, without panicking, without running to thoughts. And that's the usual way. We take refuge in the thoughts. We get scared. We get nervous. This intimacy of not knowing can be very scary. And as a Zen master once said, not knowing is the greatest intimacy. As we get so we can be here without panicking and turning to concepts and cooling down at all of this with thoughts, then this world opens up. Another dimension opens up. There's a koan in the Mumonkan that goes straight into this. Well, there are quite a lot of koans that go into this issue of knowing and not knowing. But this, just the central issue. But this koan is the one, I'm just going to read the case, is the one, case 19, that it has to do with the great master Chao Cho Joshu's awakening, his first awakening at the age of, I think, 19. He was a monk, and he asked his teacher, Nansen, what is the Tao? Nanchuan answered, ordinary mind, that is the Tao. And Chao Cho asked, then how do you get onto it? How do you approach it? Another translation. Just as we ask, how do we approach this person, this relationship? How do we approach this koan? And Nanchuan says, if you try to approach it, you go away from it. The more you seek after it, the more it runs away. Because it's an it. Because there's a subject and an object. That's not Nanchuan talking there. And then Chao Cho says, if we don't try, how can we know this? How can we know it's the Tao? And Nanchuan said, this Tao does not belong to knowing or not knowing. Knowing is an illusion. Not knowing, is ordinary not knowing, is blankness. If you attain to this Tao of no doubt, it's like the vastness of space, an unfathomable void. So how can there be right or wrong in the Tao? And at these words, teisho was suddenly enlightened. We touch into this vast, unfathomable void of our own being. We immediately recognize others as nothing but this. Not that there isn't this wondrous uniqueness, changing, patterns manifested, but that underlying this, absolutely one with this, is this mystery. It's beyond right and wrong, beyond good or bad. But it's only when we can die to this ego self, to this addictive, craving, posturing ego self, that we can know genuine intimacy. And so we come right back to this whole business of death and rebirth. How can we relate truly to anyone when we're filled with these ego-centered strivings? It's the phrase in affirming faith and mind. All this self-partiality, self-clinging. How can we truly love anyone when we're imposing on them all our needs, our unmet needs, our projections? And then they become some kind of merely a reflection of either what we want them to be, or our parents and our relationship with our parents and so forth. We don't know that person necessarily at all. We got to go beyond all these ideas about relationships if we want to live in true relationship to anyone or anything. And that's pretty deep stuff. How many of us are free of that old fairy tale image where the prince and the princess get married and live happily ever after? Hooking right into that deep notion that if we just find that right person, we'll be whole. Everything will be just fine. It's the same thing, isn't it? The core illusion that something will save us, something out there, someone or something, in some other time and place will come along and save us, or complete us. And of course, until we truly grasp that this moment, just as it is utterly complete, that we, exactly as we are, lack nothing, then we're always going to be these hungry ghosts, these thirsty spirits. Can never really swallow what's right in front of us. All kinds of ideals in our heads about what relationship should be, what the kind of person is that we want to find, or if we're in long-term committed relationship, how our partner could be that would be better from the way they are now. Or how we could maybe help them out to be better people that more clearly match what we want or need. But these human relationships are way too rich, too dynamic, alive to be planned or controlled. And that whole idea that something, that we're going to fix this person, of course, everybody knows, and intellectually I'm sure here, that's just a recipe for suffering and separation. What more can we do, really, than to just stop, to just allow this moment to be exactly as it is, to stop trying to fix our life, ourself, other people, all of that fussing and that need to adjust life to, or one's practice, to one's own ideas and opinions and judgments. What more can we do than to truly open up more fully and fearlessly to this living moment, whether we're with others, one other person, or a whole crowd of people, or alone, and to just embrace it all as it is. And this is what the practice opens up to us. It's this putting down all our ancient notions of incompleteness and imperfection, and touching into something that has no name. Only when we're at peace in our own depths can we possibly be at peace with others and in touch with this Buddha nature, this boundless mind. Remember, this whole issue of loneliness is a big one. We can cut the root of it. I remember after getting through the Koan Mu, my fairly early and shallow experience that I didn't realize at the time was so shallow, but it really made a difference. I remember afterward saying to someone, a young guy who was a good friend, that I just felt it so deeply that I could be alone, and I didn't think I'd ever be lonely again. It just came back to me this morning, reflecting on these things, this memory, and looking over it all. I have to say, it's how it's been. I don't think I've ever felt lonely since that time. Of course, you might say, well, you've had 2 marriages and 4 children, and so what's the lonely? But that really isn't the issue, is it? I mean, we can feel so lonely, right? You know, in marriage, with family, whatever it is, and nobody's ever always with somebody. So, and actually, to be alone is always for me, a nourishing, a wonderful thing too. Wonderful to be alone, wonderful to be with others. Where's really the difference? And to whatever our situation, whatever our life situation, whether we're in a marriage, whether we're alone, whether we're somewhere in between, the question really is, can we enter this Dharma gate, this non-duality, this practice? Can we enter it right from here, without any judgment? Whatever the mind state, whatever the emotional state, whatever the physical state we're in, to enter right from here, embrace it as it is, and to look intently into it, to merge with it. This is where we find our true peace, and where all questions about relationships, anything to do with self and other, just melt away. I'm not saying it isn't an ongoing challenge. It is, but how fine to have this practice. How fine to have this Sangha to work with, to help each other meet our edges, and to continue to delve into this mystery together. Well, let's stop here, and let's recite the 4 vows.